Yep.
Wow.
Here we go. Yep.
All right, everybody. Welcome once again to the Anderson Law Power Hour Power Podcast. I'm Mark. So glad to be able to join you here at Attorney Anderson's law firm, 2492 North Landing Road, Suite 104 here in Virginia Beach. Phone number, easy to remember, 800-1000, 800-1000. And I've officially knighted you the Second Amendment expert in Virginia.
Woo! Oh, thank
well
you, sir.
deserved.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
It definitely deserved. Man, this is an exciting time.
Yeah. It is amazing to see how one side of the pendulum is doing their thing and the other side of the pendulum is responding.
Yes, sir.
Preemptively responding to what's going to happen. And so my name is Tim Anderson. I'm the attorney here with the Anderson Law Power Hour. Mark and I have been together for almost a whole year now, and we do this show every week.
That's right. Time is moving.
Every week, Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. And this is the time where you can ask questions right here on the show about the topic. And today's topic is going to be about all of the bills and laws that are being proposed in Richmond, as well as sanctuary cities.
That's hot topic.
Yep. So that's it. That's what we're going to talk about. If you have questions, this is going to be the time to type those questions into the comment section. Right. I'm watching them here on my computer. You can kind of see it right here. I'm watching those questions. I'm going to read those questions as they are popping up and try to answer them. Now, when we do these videos, a lot of you like to email me and so forth, and I'm trying to respond to you, but we are getting so many
that's great.
So many people watching our videos. I just can't respond to 30,000 people watching videos and asking questions. So this is a very good time to post your questions, ask them, and let's kind of get to it.
Yeah. May I interject, sir? You've got a great library, great podcast that are available on the website.
Yep. So we just did our last video moments ago about Senate Bill 51. I have done a video on every proposed bill that is before the General Assembly currently. Now, if you want to know about what the laws are, I have addressed those.
Yeah.
Go to our Facebook page, virginialawoffice.com, facebook.com/virginialawoffice, and that is the place to watch those videos and educate yourself. So, but before we get too far down the road, I want to talk about sanctuary cities for just a moment. So tonight at 6 p.m. in Virginia Beach, at the City Council building in Building 1, they are going to have a City Council meeting. And the Patriots are up at that meeting to speak on a non-agenda forum about Virginia Beach becoming a sanctuary city. Yeah. And so if you have time, tonight would be a great time to show up at the City Hall building, second floor into the City Council, and show your support for those of us who are speaking. I am one of the listed speakers. Each of the speakers will get 3 minutes. So I think there are 7 or 8 of us. So you will be able to be there in solidarity to those of us who are sticking our necks out and actually addressing the council on this point. So if you can be there, tonight is a great time to be there. The news is going to be there. I was interviewed earlier today by News Channel 3. They are definitely going to be there. I suspect the other stations will be there. So a big amount of people showing up at this could be something that causes attention for everybody who's interested in this.
We're standing up for our rights.
That's right.
That's what's going on here.
And we're doing it in a peaceful
peaceful
way, a peaceful way. A lot of chest thumpers are out there saying Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
This is not that. This is engaging the government individually and persuading the government to try to see things the way that we want them to go as supporters of the Second Amendment. Yeah. So a sanctuary city is not going to exempt us from the laws that are going to likely come down from Richmond. But there could be issues of whether the city enacts resources to prosecute those laws.
That's right.
And so it is not going to give you an immunity. We're going to talk about what you can do to be in compliance with the laws that are coming down in this segment. But It's not going to give you immunity, but what it's going to make is a political statement to those in power about this is something that's not just going to be rolled over on. This is not California. This is not New York. We're not going to just give up our rights and hand them over to the government. Showing up peacefully, respectfully, and in droves will be a huge statement. So if you can be there tonight, 6 p.m., Virginia Beach City Council, let's fill that building up with patriots.
Yeah, I've been watching some of the social media posts and so forth. Norfolk recently, Norfolk is going to be doing that. Let's see, Dinwiddie was one of the first in recent memory to bring about their Second Amendment sanctuary city proposals. We have 95 counties in Virginia. 23 are having it on the books at the very least. They've got the sanctuary.
Essex just yesterday.
Wow, yeah.
Essex and Hampton even is coming on board.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is that if you're in a sanctuary zone, it's basically saying we're not going to use local resources to enforce the law. If, for instance, they put, and we're going to talk about this, but they put an assault weapons ban in place, and it says you can't have the gun after July 1, and on July 2 you still have the gun, you are still committing a crime under the new law. But what Virginia Beach would say if it declared itself a sanctuary zone is that the police department would not assist in prosecuting those crimes. Now, it doesn't mean that the state police can't come in. It doesn't mean that Richmond can't appoint special prosecutors through the Attorney General's office, but it means that the local government, and if enough local governments say we're not going to enforce these laws, maybe that will get the attention of the legislatures to soften these laws up before they pass.
Thanks. I've heard some of the opponents of this saying, well, it's just symbolic. But I think you use a good word, solidarity.
Right.
We're there in solidarity. And I do believe some police chiefs are very keen, some sheriffs are very keen. I've seen some of the news media, and they are not utilizing their resources to go after people. Right. So it's a good thing.
Virginia is a unique place because we are in a position where we had the largest mass shooting in the Commonwealth several months ago.
That's right.
And so, although Virginia Beach may be a huge military community, it is very sensitive about, what could we do better? And one problem with the Republican side of the equation is that there is this no additional rules or restrictions should be passed. And, quite frankly, I think many people think that maybe there are things that we can do that might be a little better. Doesn't mean we're restricting or making people felons, but maybe we can twist and tweak a rule here and there to make it a little bit more safe. And if we can, and it doesn't inherently infringe on people's rights, that's the issue. And the problem is that both sides are ingrained in their positions.
That's correct. Yes.
And they're not talking.
No middle ground they see.
And hopefully what will happen is that if these sanctuary cities pop up, it will force the left, who is way over here, to swing back a little bit more to the middle and move forward. So, all right, we got lots of questions on Facebook.
All right, thanks.
We've got 7 comments already, so let's kind of talk about this. Mitch, you're right. Greensville and Louisa both came on board with these sanctuary things. But what it would be if Virginia Beach came on board? Beach, which is the largest city in Virginia and home to where the worst shooting in the Commonwealth has occurred. What it would be if Virginia Beach came on board and said, "That's right, significant. We as a city want reasonable gun reform, not extreme gun reform."
Yeah.
So I have all the laws here. Now keep in mind that the proposals that we're talking about, none of those have become law. But what we are talking about is the proposed bills that are before the court, and that are before the Virginia legislature, the Virginia House, the Virginia Senate. And so these are indications of what we can expect. So we're looking at those. So House Bill 2, Mark, we've talked about this many times, but House Bill 2 talks about the universal background check rules.
Yeah.
We talked about that. That is on, again, all of these bills have been addressed. I'm not going to go through them in depth on this discussion, but House Bill 2 talks about it becoming a felony for a private party to sell a firearm to another private party without getting a background check on the purchaser.
And that's something that you are for.
I am for the concept of parties should have to do background checks. I'm not for the fact that somebody would become a felon if they disregard
Gotcha.
that.
Yes, right.
You know, that is, you know, the legislature in Virginia is real quick to say, you're a felon, you're a felon, you're a felon, you're a felon. Well, being a felon is a big deal.
That sure is. Class 6.
Class 6 felony.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And so we should reserve when we're going to call somebody a felon to somebody who's actually doing some type of a real crime. You know, selling a gun to somebody else, maybe there should be some kind of civil penalty for that. Maybe there should be some incentive for the person to comply. But to call them a felon, that's a big deal.
That sure
and
is,
so
man.
I am not in support of House Bill 2 as it's written to say that a felon. I am in support of some rule change that anytime a gun goes from one person to another, there should be a background check on that person, except in situations involving spouses or, you know, a granddad giving his grandson a gun or something like that. But when you're selling a gun to a stranger and you don't know anything about that stranger, I have no problem with the law being changed that says that person should have to undergo a background check.
Yep.
I just don't think it should involve criminal felony behavior.
Yeah. Let's get to the logistics. If me and Joe has a nice firearm I'd like to buy, and he says, okay, well, Mark, I know you, but I need to make sure that I'm legal and that you're legal. The process would be for us to go to a gun shop such as yours to have you do the background check?
Yeah, that's right. So, Kyle, this is a live question. I'm just trying to get through some of the things. I'm watching your questions, and I promise you I will get to them. So just give me a couple minutes. We're just trying to get through some of the basics. So two private parties would go to a gun shop. They would pay a small fee, and they would be able to engage the gun shop to do the paperwork and make sure that the prospective purchaser isn't disqualified from owning the firearm.
Right.
Just like you would have to do if you went to a gun shop, a regular gun
Yeah.
shop.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, so let's go through this. Well, you know, Michael, that's a good point. When does universal background check turn into registration? Let me address that because I've seen that question pop up quite a bit. And Michael, I want to address that. So when you go into a gun shop, and I know this because I own one, all right, and you buy a pistol from me, when we tell the state police you're buying a pistol, that's all that they know. They don't know what kind of pistol. They don't know what the serial number is.
Great, okay.
They don't know any of that. They just know that you're buying a pistol. And so the records are kept by the gun shop, and the government doesn't have access to those unless there's a compelling reason they need to have access. So doing a universal background check under the same procedures of how gun shops normally do business would not result in a registration in Virginia. So we don't have to, if we just say it's exactly the same for private parties as it is for somebody purchasing from a gun shop, it would not result in registration. That would simply just make sure that the purchaser does not have a felony or a protective order or a domestic violence conviction or been in a mental hospital or any of the other prohibitions. It just gives that layer of security so it doesn't turn into that. So, you know, Michael, I hope that helped you, helps you on the talking points. It's, if we just simply had a House bill that said any transaction has to be exactly like it is at a gun shop, whether it's between a person in a gun shop or two private people, that would not result in some type of gun registration.
Yeah.
All right, so I saw some questions on here about red flag laws. So let's talk about that as well. Let me see if I can get into this. Okay, Kyle, let me answer your question because I know you've asked this. If the bills are signed into law, do they go into effect while challenged in the court? So Kyle, what happens is that the laws will probably pass sometime in February, March, and then they go into effect July 1. So once the laws are specifically known, then the lawyers can engage and go to federal court and ask the federal courts for injunctions.
Yes.
And an injunction would be the federal court saying, hey, this law violates the Constitution, at least on its face. We're not going to let it go into effect until we hear some additional evidence. So you're going to see a flurry, Kyle, of law that is going to kick through from probably March until June, and it's all going to be in federal court. And it's going to be whether the new rules infringe on the Second Amendment. Now, Facebook, keep in mind there is a case, Justin, you have a good point here on this, but there is a case before the United States Supreme Court called Warman versus Healy, which is going to definitively answer whether or not we can own what the Virginia legislature is going to call an assault firearm.
That's
so
right,
things
yes.
like AR-15s and so forth. Now, the Supreme Court has not accepted certiorari on that case, but it is before the court, and I do expect that the Supreme Court will take it up because that question has to be addressed.
Yes, sir. Yes.
It has to be addressed. It has to. The Supreme Court needs to definitively weigh in as to whether citizens can own this type of a class of firearm.
Yeah.
Now, citizens can't own a bazooka. Citizens can't own lots of military grade, surface-to-air missiles. But can we own AR-15s? And the Supreme Court, with all the states doing what they're doing, I think that the Supreme Court is going to accept it. And Warman versus Healy could definitively address, most specifically, Senate Bill 16. Which is going to be an assault firearm ban.
Yeah, you brought up a good point some months back when we were talking about the perception of the news media, how they feed us what an assault weapon is versus what we might say a conventional or outside of the discussion, a shotgun or a pistol.
Right.
But I remember years back, just a personal reference, when I was in the Marines, I was a 2311. That's an armory tech. And you find some who are so proficient with a shotgun
Right.
or 45, but the media has hyped up, and they use one. I think we need to get back to the forefront. It's the idea or the choice of those who would do these illegal crimes, the mass shootings.
Right.
The high capacity doesn't matter. In all practicality, it really doesn't matter if a criminal has ill intent.
Right. You're right. I mean, it does maybe make the road a little easier. But reloading a firearm that holds 20 or reloading a firearm that holds 30 or reloading a firearm that holds 10 is matters of seconds.
That's correct, yeah.
So, what Justin's asking is NFA items. So we're talking about like silencers.
Gotcha.
Mostly silencers. I suspect he's talking about silencers, but it could be machine guns and short barrel rifles. All of that, Justin, is going to be illegal to own and possess after Senate Bill 16 passes, if it passes as written. And there is no grandfather clause. So, Justin, if you went through the NFA process and you own a silencer, for instance, if Senate Bill 16 passes, you will not be allowed to possess those items in Virginia, or subjecting yourself to felony prosecution after the implementation of the law. So, even though you validly purchased them, even though you have your tax stamp, you will have to get them out of Virginia to successfully not be prosecuted under those rules. Now, that's also assuming that the federal courts don't step in, but assuming they don't, that's it. And Jolie, it's the same with a trust. They are not going to be allowed to be in the Commonwealth of Virginia if Senate Bill 16 passes.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier this year as President Trump did ban bump stocks. That bump stock would fall under the NFA?
No, bump stocks come under a totally separate action. Bump stocks are going to be illegal to have in Virginia as well under Senate Bill 14. Okay. And so, but those are not NFA items. Those were over the counter. Now, here's a good, a decent question that was asked just a second ago. And, I hear this a lot. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. Okay. There's no such thing as an assault rifle. Yeah, there is. The such thing as what an assault firearm is whatever Virginia says it is.
Okay.
So if Virginia lists 50 types of guns and says these are assault firearms, these are illegal to own, that is the definition of an assault firearm. It's what the Virginia legislature says it is. Yeah. And so you're right, there's no company that makes an assault firearm or an assault rifle, but the legislature is going to determine what an assault firearm is, and they're going to define it, and they're defining it as pretty much any of the AR-15 types of firearms, AK-47s, shotguns holding more than 7, guns weighing more than 50 ounces. They're going to have magazines holding more than 10 to be illegal. These are things that they are defining, and so there is a such thing as an assault firearm because it's what Virginia is going to say it is.
Gotcha. I see.
Now, if Virginia wants to say a .22 rifle is an assault firearm, then that's an assault firearm. Now, they're not doing that, but the point is they can.
They can, yes.
That's their definition. All right, so short barrel rifles, the same thing. Your short barrel rifles are going to be barred. Pretty much, Kyle, any item that you can have under the Firearm Act is going to be illegal to own in Virginia if Senate Bill 16 passes, unless Warman versus Healy comes down and definitively answers those questions. All right, so we've got 25 comments here. So, So Ed, the Ed's asking, can we do something today to stop these rules? And we'll keep in mind the laws haven't passed yet, so there's no way to preemptively. That's why we're seeing these sanctuary cities pop up. This is the preemptive statement, political statement saying, hey, we are seeing the Democrats be extreme.
Yes.
And now we want the Democrats to come back more towards the middle. There's not going to be a grandfather clause to assault firearms in Virginia under Senate Bill 16. There is a grandfather clause in California, in New York, in New Jersey. The national federal assault weapons ban that's been proposed by Elizabeth Warren has a grandfather clause, but the Virginia Democrats are saying no grandfather clause. And so that is going to mean that you own a gun legally today, a silencer legally today. If you don't get it out of Virginia on July 1, then you're committing a felony, even though you legally purchased it. That is what the law is going to say. Now, hopefully, the federal courts will engage, and hopefully the courts will say, passed.
That would be great.
But I don't like the idea of my constitutional rights being decided by a judge that may have had a bad breakfast that morning.
Okay,
So the point is this: is that we're putting all of our faith into one single federal judge that's going to hear the case, and depending upon his own political views and how he interprets the law, it may or may I would much rather everybody come in the middle and try to find some common ground rather than the Democrats just throwing all the extreme out, and then we hope that a federal judge is going to, find that those rules are unconstitutional. That's a dangerous precedent, for everybody to be in, because if that judge doesn't, then the rules kick in, and if that judge does, then it goes up to a higher court, and then there's other judges, and then all of that craziness, and there's all this uncertainty. I would much rather there be reasonable restrictions, not that we're going to love them, but rather reasonable restrictions than extreme restrictions that would make me a felon.
That's correct.
I will be a felon if these rules pass and I were to keep the weapons that I currently own. I would be a felon under these rules. That is insane.
I'd like to just interject, Tim. You're listening to the Anderson Law Power Hour podcast. Appreciate you joining us here every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. The number to the Attorney Tim's office is 800-1000, 800-1000, 2492 North Landing Road, Suite 104 here in Virginia Beach. You're welcome to make a phone call if you got any questions. And as I stated in the show, you're the second expert gun rights or having their rights restored. That's an area, of course, that you specialize in. And the exciting thing about this is that I'm seeing all types of citizens engaged from a variety of backgrounds, and those who are going to the city council and other aspects of other areas in their local government, making this before the city council and making very articulate arguments about it. And one gentleman brought up the Virginia Constitution, that if in fact these go through, Sections 10, Section 11, all of those which affect our due process would be thrown out the window.
That's right. That's right. It's amazing. It is amazing. But even though we are in a crisis moment, we are talking about the citizenry engaging.
Yes. Yeah.
That's exciting.
That is. Yeah. Yeah.
That is unbelievable. I do have a question on here from a viewer of whether I'm sure about the silencer thing, and so let me go through. I'm going to take just a second. I'm going to find the specific code section here that deals with that.
Yeah. You're finding some delegates who have, of course, brought this before the Virginia legislature, and not to throw his name under the bus, so to speak, but recently Gerald Jones in Norfolk was in support of the legislation and the proposed legislation. He recently wrote something. And then, of course, Attorney General Mark Herring, everybody has varying opinions about what he's asking or being asked. The fundamental issue is that this is an American thing, and we don't want our rights thrown out the window. We don't want anyone to just say, hey, as you said, I don't want to become a Class 6 felon. That's serious business.
Right.
That is very, very serious. And just as you go ahead and get through those questions, Tim, kind of like the 101 here. I'm the 101 guy because I'm excited about this and learning myself. A city as a Second Amendment sanctuary city, you've probably researched this, is a city which municipal laws tend to protect, as was initially, undocumented illegal immigrants from deportation despite federal laws. However, this same idea can be adopted to, and as we are aiming to do, pardon the pun or analogy, to provide this as a reference for Second Amendment sanctuary cities. And they're popping up all over the Commonwealth, and that's the exciting thing. As Tim said, we're all getting engaged. And resolutions adopted by some jurisdictions in the U.S. to not expend resources to enforce certain gun control measures perceived as violation of the Second Amendment. High-capacity magazines, assault weapon bans, and the red flag laws. I can see some credibility, something viable for the red flag laws because of the mental health component.
Yeah. So remember when we talked about that, and we talked about the issue dealing with, what happens when somebody is in a crisis moment.
Yes.
And we know that they're in a crisis moment. There's not a way to divest that person from their firearms. So red flag laws have this altruistic benefit that says, hey, this person's in a crisis. We don't have a way to deal with that. Mm-hmm. Our law makes it, in a position where, we can just safely take away their firearms so they don't hurt themselves. We're the good guys here.
Yeah.
However, the problem with that is, what if somebody's doing something, with a little bit, more negative motive?
Mm-hmm.
What if I just don't like you and I say you're in a crisis,
right, and
we can go forward from there? So
that would be the extreme risk protection order. It still would fall under there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody has a bad attitude or a bad day, so to speak, and that would be with them making a complaint to law enforcement. And law enforcement would have to petition a judge or a magistrate before they go in and take your weapons?
Right.
Okay. So there's a time factor there that needs to be abided by as well. And folks can refer by that to Bill 1763 to understand a little bit more about the red flag laws. Yes, obviously, as we pointed out some months back when we were doing the show about the Virginia Beach shooting, that gentleman was perfect in the sense that he didn't show any immediate signs. But maybe as a human resources person, and we know a lot of these workplace shootings and so forth, maybe they could implement some type of policy that would give the localities the ability to effectively implement an extreme risk protection order.
Yeah, well, I think that those are going to come. So the issue is not whether or not we like them or not. It's what's going to happen when the rules come down. Are they challengeable in court?
Okay. Yeah.
Now these extreme protective orders are in all over the place, and when we're talking about whether or not silencer or whether or not somebody can have a silencer, for instance, like him. If the police come in and seize this guy's firearms and take his weapons, and then he says, hey, there's nothing wrong with me, then the law says, well, you have a short period of time, a week or two, and you go see a judge, and the judge is going to sort all this out. And that's your due process. It's due process after the government has taken your property, which that's not usually how due process works.
Oh, gotcha.
Due process usually works before the government takes your property, but in this case, the government takes your property, then you're afforded due process. It's backwards, but the law has generally been, in all of the states that have these laws, and Virginia is modeling these states, that you are not going to be in a position of challenging that on a constitutional basis because you are being afforded due process on the backside. Even though the police come to your house and they take your guns, you get the due process on the backside, and that's how these laws are passing constitutional muster. So it is a big problem that these are coming down the pipe. So anyway, let me address this one guy's question because I don't want to spend all this too much time. So there was a question about whether SB 16 prohibits silencers. So when you look at the 2019 legislative session with House Bill 4021, they were proposing last year that these silencers would be illegal to own and possess. And so all the bills have not been filed yet, but it would seem almost certain that 4021 is going to pop its head back up. And so when we're talking about what the law is going to look like next year, we're looking at most likely, and again, we don't know what anything's going to happen, but what most likely, you're going to see Senate Bill 16 or some variation. You're going to see some variation of former House Bill 4021, and it's going to make pretty much any NFA item illegal to own and possess in Virginia, and that's so again, we don't know for sure, but I'm highly suspicious that when all this is sorted out, we are going to see some changes. Now, I want you to also understand this: we have 10 bills here, from Senate Bill 14 to Senate Bill 88. Last year, the House bill that I'm referring to is House Bill 4021. That means there was 4,020 bills before that one that went up there. Obviously, not all those rules passed, but lots of stuff is going to get thrown together in January. These are just the pre-versions of that. It's very likely you're going to see some version of 4021 pop up that's going to make it, illegal. And 4021 says any person who legally owns an assault firearm, large capacity magazine, silencer, or trigger activator may retain it until July 1st, 2020, and then they have to dispose of it or get it out of Virginia. Otherwise, they'll be committing a Class 6 felony. So I hope that generally brings some questions here to answers to that. All right, more questions. We've got 35 questions here, Mark. Let's get into the rest of these.
We appreciate you listening in. Again, if you'd like to call the office of having a reason to set up an appointment with an attorney, 800-1000, a variety of things that Anderson Law Firm handles, criminal convictions, also, of course, as we're talking about, restoration of gun rights, DUIs, bankruptcy. Great show, by the way. I know we're talking about this, but a lot of great shows that he's been able to bring to, and you can find it on your podcast.
I think here's the thing. I mean, there's chest thumpers on the left and there's chest thumpers on the right. We're gonna have civil war. We're gonna do all this stuff. I think the vast majority of the people that watch my videos and the vast majority of the people that live in Virginia are right where I am, right in the middle. And basically what we want is that the Democrats promised in their campaigning that they would pass reasonable common sense gun reform.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, if they think that reasonable common sense gun reform means basically making felons out of a huge portion of the Commonwealth of Virginia by owning a firearm that was legally purchased prior to the law being implemented, by telling a woman who brings a gun in her purse and walks into the DMV, she has a concealed carry permit, that would be a misdemeanor and she could go to jail for a year, by being on the ocean front where they sell alcohol and maybe having, just a sip of alcohol and having a concealed firearm, that makes you, subject to a year, a punishable jailable offense. If they think that those are reasonable common sense gun reforms, then that's not what my definition of reasonable common sense gun reform is. That sounds like extreme.
Yes.
And in fact, it's more extreme than the laws in California, in New Jersey, and New York. These are the most extreme rules. And so the Democrats have said we want reasonable gun reform. And what they're proposing is extreme gun reform.
Sure is, yeah.
All
Did
right.
I see somewhere martial arts?
Oh, yeah, I'm
Isn't
glad
that
you
crazy?
said that. Listen, Facebook, I want to address this. So let's talk about House Bill 64. There's a paramilitary activity bill, which is going to prohibit drilling, parading, and marching with firearms in times of peace if that is used to intimidate somebody else. Now, the problem is that's a subjective standard. So if we're neighbors, Mark, and I'm outside with my buddies and we're drilling in the backyard, we have some rope course and tires in the backyard, and we're acting like soldiers and drilling, and that somehow intimidates you, then you can call the cops and say, hey, they're performing paramilitary activities in their backyard, and I'm intimidated by that, so therefore they need to come out and be arrested.
Right.
That's a very scary standard because anybody can say you're intimidating them if you have a firearm and you're drilling or parading or something like that. It's subjective, and so that's very scary. Senate Bill 64 is outrageous, but it has become diluted in the misinformation society that we have. It does not seem to have anything to do with martial arts. And that's what you just said.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with martial arts in the capacity of teaching somebody how to do karate,
right.
or something like that. It would be with drilling, parading, or marching. Now, it could affect firearm instructors from being able to do firearm instruction, for instance, if that could be defined as drilling. But it would definitely not affect some people doing kick moves and chopping boards with fists and things like that. I do not read 64 like that, even though 64 is absolutely terrible. It's an attack on the Second Amendment. It's an attack on free speech. It's an attack on the ability to assemble.
Okay.
But
Gotcha.
I don't see how it affects the ability to do martial arts.
Because I remember hearing that somewhere, and I know in martial arts we use nunchucks.
Right.
There's a saber, the blades, the swords, and so forth. I was saying, you got to be kidding me.
Right.
That was crazy.
So what many people have asked me, and what I want to really try to focus the next, and I know I can't get to all these questions, there's so many, but what many people have asked me is just cut to the chase. What's the deal here? What's the deal? What are we really looking at? Realistically, here's what we are really looking at in Virginia this time next year, assuming the courts do not intervene, okay? We're looking at an assault firearms ban as defined by the Virginia legislature of what an assault firearm is. We're likely looking at most items on the NFA being banned under some type of a revision of House Bill 4021. We're looking at any kind of bump stock or trigger activator being illegal. We are looking at some kind of a penalty for failing to report a lost and stolen. We're looking at universal background checks likely going to be implemented with felony consequences if you don't. We are looking at magazine restrictions, somewhere around 10 for pistols. We are looking at some type of extreme risk protective order law coming into place. And we are looking at, probably some type of rule that deals with carrying a firearm at a public event, some type of restrictions about that. Those are what are likely going to come down the pipe, and those are likely going to pass. There is no grandfather clause as proposed. Hopefully, there will be some grandfather clauses as proposed. And I had one guy come up here and say, well, a grandfather clause is just the end of the Second Amendment because when you're dead, you can't transfer it. Here's the reason why grandfather clauses are very, very important. When I started practicing law 20 years ago, Mark, it was illegal to be in a homosexual relationship. Felony. So if you're a gay man and you have a homosexual sexual relationship with another man, you were committing a felony 20 years ago, punishable by 10 years in prison and prosecuted And in fact, I represented people in my early career that were prosecuted under that law and are convicted felons.
Whoa.
Even today. As the law evolved, now we are in 2019, and not only can you engage in that kind of conduct, but you can even get married as a homosexual. And so the law changes because the law is nothing more than the will of the people.
That's correct, yes.
And so, the will of the people were at one point that you shouldn't be allowed to even have a homosexual relationship, and now the will of the people is not only can you do that, but you can even get married and be at the exact same level as a heterosexual couple. Okay? Why we need a grandfather clause is because we need time to get Republicans back into office and get these rules repealed. We need time to do that. The will of the people has to be to push back on the Democrat election booth and at the ballot box to try to get the laws to swing back to the right. That's why grandfather clauses are extremely important, so that we are not all felons come the next election day. So, grandfather clauses are extremely important. Don't concede that is giving up anything. It just gives us time to swing the law back to the right, because Virginia is not California, and Virginia is not New York. Virginia is a conservative, military-friendly state that has pockets of highly populated, liberal-leaning thinkers. And what has to happen is that when these extreme laws get imposed on us, the citizenry needs to wake up, and even maybe some of the Democrats in the highly Democrat areas that aren't, super, and get the Republicans back in and get those rules changed back. And that's what has to happen. That's why we need grandfather clauses.
Yeah. I'd like to take this to another end result. Let's say these laws do become, these bills do pass, and they become law January or July 1st, 2020, and an incident occurs, and I'm at my backyard or wherever, and I'm target practicing. Maybe I have some friends, and maybe there's something we do under the militia thing. That person calls the police, and they come and write the criminal complaint. What's my recourse? What do I do?
You're going to trial. I mean, you're going to have to go to. You're not going to write you a criminal complaint. That's a felony. You're going to get arrested. You're going to be charged with felony.
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that.
No due process.
Well, I mean, you'll have due process through the criminal justice system as to whether. See, the rule that what 64 talks about is paramilitary activities for the purposes of intimidating some other group of people. And so what the law is going to, what would have to happen is they would have to prove that you were doing what you were doing for the sole purpose of intimidating a group or a particular person.
Okay. Or a possession of AR-15 assault weapon.
Well, now that would be just simple possession. So if Senate Bill 16 passes and you have an AR-15 and it says you can't have it after July 1, 2020, and you have it on July 2, 2020, you're committing a felony.
Okay.
In Virginia. And whether you're in a sanctuary city or not, you're committing a felony. And so what do, Facebook? What do, people that are watching this video? You're going to have to get your guns out of the territorial district of Virginia. You're going to have to get them to North Carolina. You're going to have to transport them to family members that live in other states until the courts either enjoin the law or until we vote the pendulum back into the middle from the extreme left. And I know a lot of you are going to say, I'm never giving up my guns. Let them come and try to take it, all of that. But for the reasonable person watching this, the practical advice is that we're going to come up with, I'm going to get 10 buddies and we're going to go rent a storage locker down in Moyock. And we're going to bring our gun safes down there and we're going to store our guns in a storage locker in Moyock until the law is either sorted out by the courts or repealed by future legislatures down the road. That's what the reasonable person is going to do that doesn't want to wake up with the possibility of police kicking down their door with a search warrant because of an illegally possessed item in there. Now, this again assumes that Senate Bill 16 goes through This assumes that the federal courts don't enjoin it, and this assumes that this becomes the law and there's no court challenge to it. That is the only move that you have is to either sell them, sell the guns, get rid of them, or if you want to keep them, to store them outside of the territorial district of the Virginia border.
That's a good idea, storing them. Good idea. Yeah.
All right. Well, we have about 15 minutes, so 40 comments. Let's kind of go through here. Deborah, we just talked about Senate Bill 64. I don't read it the way that a lot of people have said. I don't think it affects martial arts. So I would, Senator Lucas's bill is very insane as it affects the ability to free assemble and have militia type of activities, but I don't read it as being some type of bill that restricts martial arts. All right. So
when we do these videos, a lot of you.
So
you will be going to the meeting tonight at Virginia Beach at the courthouse, and I want to, if I can, give a shout out to. So you might run into Tony Myers.
Yeah.
He's in Suffolk, and Robert McCall. He has started the petition here in Virginia Beach. You'll be able to at least say hello to them and get a chance to meet Attorney Tim Anderson.
Yeah,
get a business card.
McCall is connected with me on Facebook.
Great.
And he's the one who's kind of generating this. And my thing on sanctuary is that they're not going to keep you. If the law says you can't do something and you're doing it, you're committing a crime. And for me, I don't have the appetite of being criminally prosecuted, and seeing how the court may work this stuff out. My position is going to be I'm going to find some buddies and we're going to store our firearms down in Moyock. But how these, but McCall has motivated people to come there. I've heard even Scott Taylor is going to be there. Scott Taylor, he's running for Senate. He used to be a congressman from. Writing about this, even though unfortunately under the circumstances of our Second Amendment rights being possibly trampled on, it's exciting to watch the democracy in action.
Yes, sir.
Right. It is an exciting time to be part of a situation where we have maybe a tyrannical side of the government imposing extreme views on the population, and the population is coming forward and saying and checking them.
That's right.
Without bullets being shot at each other, without somebody being assassinated and all that craziness. We're talking about the citizenry coming together, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, and saying, no, we're not going to let you turn Virginia into the most restrictive gun state in the nation. We're not going to let that go without having our voices heard. And so I love it. I love it to that degree. Bill, yeah, I agree. I think that our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves by what they're proposing. Mm-hmm. It was clearly what their intent is that we can have a militia, and if the militia is basically a group of guys that fights against the government when the government is being tyrannical, and Senator Lucas says that we can't even drill as militia anymore. If we could possibly offend somebody when we do that, intimidate them while we're doing that. So how do you have a militia if you can't drill? All you have to do is have one person say, oh, I'm intimidated by that, and then the whole group gets arrested for Class 5 felonies. It is totally insane. And the Supreme Court in Massachusetts just 2 years ago the United States Supreme Court ruled that you can own a stun gun under the Second Amendment. That's pretty crazy to think about. What's the Supreme Court doing that for? Because Massachusetts said it's a felony to possess a stun gun. A little zapper.
Right.
You walk up and you zap somebody with it. Doesn't kill them, just you zap them and they go to the ground. It's a felony to possess those in Massachusetts. Somebody got prosecuted and convicted, and they appealed it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said you can own a stun gun under the Second Amendment. That's not a firearm.
Right.
That's a stun gun.
It's protective, self-defense.
It's a weapon, and that's exactly what the Supreme Court said. We are allowed to own any type of weapon that is, for civilian use. And that's why the Warman case has to be heard by the Supreme Court, because the biggest question that is affecting the entire nation right now is whether there can be a means. And, those are defined as assault weapons by almost every bill that's. Can we have them? Are they weapons of war or are they for civilian use? And the Supreme Court has never answered that question, but if they do and they say we can own them, then Senate Bill 16 goes out the window, even if it becomes the law. Yeah. Just like Virginia's homosexuality felony went out the window when the Virginia Supreme Court said, or when the United States Supreme Court said, you're allowed to get married as a homosexual couple. So that's why the courts are so important here, is to check.
As the Democrats are pushing to attempt to reduce crime. The Rand Corporation, this university, this expert, that individual has said these have nominal effect on reduction in crime. Nominal effect, not even quantifiable in a way of speaking. And that's the peculiar aspect about it. So law-abiding citizens, we are being assaulted and we're being lumped into the categories of the criminals.
Well, that is the right's argument. Okay, that is the right Republican NRA. That is their argument, which is there's no. Every time somebody commits a crime, you want to restrict firearms on the millions and millions of people that lawfully own firearms. And the reality is that there's always going to be crime. Right. You take away, some alien comes across the world and peels up all the guns, and there's no guns anywhere in the the world. Somebody's going to drive a bus into a crowd of people at an event. Somebody's going to throw a rock and kill somebody. There's always going to be that. So creating legislation that reacts to what somebody did doesn't necessarily make us any more safe. I mean, when the 9/11 attacks happened, we have to go through all this baloney now to go through the airport. Is it really making us more safe? It's just one of those. It's one of those arguments that they make legislation in reaction to what criminal behavior is, but criminal behavior is always going to be there. Yeah. And so, and here's the other real thing about why state bans on assault weapons are just dumb. Is if it is the true intention of the legislature to make Virginia more safe, okay? We're going to ban assault weapons. They're not allowed in Virginia. They have to be removed. We got to get them out of here so that we make the state safe. Anybody can go to the gun shop in Moyock and buy an assault weapon. That's right. And then drive it right back into Virginia if they're intending to cause harm, because they're not illegal nationally. And so if they're not illegal nationally, anybody can buy a rifle from any state in just by going down there. So if I have intention of creating chaos and I can't buy my assault weapon at the local Virginia gun shop, I'll just drive down to Elizabeth City, buy my assault weapon down there, and come up here and commit the crime. So these bills are not making anybody more safe.
That's correct.
They're not changing anything at the state level in anything. Maybe on a national conversation they could do something. One thing they talked about doing was making AR-15s go on the NFA, background check. One thing that has never against that, but I'm saying that could be a compromise. Gotcha. That could be a way to do that, because nobody uses a machine gun. Right. Nobody's used a machine gun because the people that own the machine guns went through such extensive background checks. They're safe.
Got your point. Yes, I got you.
So, all right, let's see. We've got about 5 more minutes here. Let's see. 43 questions. Let's see if I can get to one that So yeah, Jennifer's asking about hunters under the age of 16 that may become illegal. That is wrapped up in the Senate Bill 16 about minors being able to purchase and or possess firearms. That's a scary thought, Jennifer. It's hard to really definitively say exactly whether that is going to be interpreted in the way that a lot of people are interpreting it, but I can see where that's coming out of. There could be a provision that is read in such a way that you could make a dad taking his son out with a shotgun a crime.
Crazy.
Yeah. Ed, the question is, how do we get the Supreme Court to listen to us? That's a losing argument. So here's basically when parties get to the Supreme Court, they file petitions, and then the Supreme Court decides whether they're going to take the case or not. Now, if you want to have your voice heard, you have to file something called an amicus brief with the court that would be in support of either one side or the other. And so in order for the Supreme Court to hear your version, you would have to file an amicus brief in the Warman versus Healy case, which would require you to hire an attorney who knows what they're doing. I mean, certainly something we could do, but that's not a simple thing. You just can't write to the Supreme Court and tell them your views. You would have to file an amicus brief with the United States Supreme Court for them to understand your position on Warman versus Healy. Bobby, sorry about getting cut. I think Facebook does that to us intentionally to kind of mess with our feed. But it is, it is. So kind of in summary and wrapping this thing up, come to Virginia Beach tonight if you live in Virginia Beach. It's big. It's a big night for us. It's a big night for us to show that we support the Second Amendment, that we recognize the extreme bills that are being proposed by Richmond. We recognize the playbook, which is make everybody a felon. Everybody's going to be a felon.
Right.
One way or the other, everybody's going to be a felon. So we recognize that, and we're going to say that's too extreme. That's too much. And we want Virginia Beach to be a sanctuary city, and we're not going to use the resources of Virginia Beach to impose these laws. Not that they won't be the laws, but we don't want the resources to be used to impose that. It's a political statement only, but it's a political statement that I think the largest city in Virginia Beach could make that would echo in Richmond when it's time, when these people are sitting around up there deciding what kind of regulations they're going to, down our throat.
Yeah. January 8th, the new session starts.
January 8th.
January 8th.
And, keep in mind, like I just said a minute ago, we're on Senate Bill 88, okay? Last year, there was a Senate Bill 4021. So there are going to be thousands of bills that are going to get proposed starting in January. It's going to be a flurry. And I'm going to do my best to try to keep up with it and give you ideas of what's happening. But Senate Bill 16 may not even see the light of day. It could be Senate Bill 243, which is something more extreme or less extreme. What we're commenting on is these are proposals, these are ideas, and all of this in the backdrop with Governor Northam saying he wants to find ways to confiscate firearms leads me to believe that we're looking at a very, very aggressive legislature next year.
Yeah.
All right. Share our videos, Facebook, and we will see you next time, next Tuesday. And maybe I'll see you tonight in Virginia Beach.
All right.